Joe Hennes from Muppet fan site ToughPigs.com. We are here to talk about the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance with the ToughPigs team. As I said, my name is Joe Hennes, and I'd like to introduce you to everyone else. Anthony, go.
I'm Anthony Strand, and I'm newly excited about the Dark Crystal, so let's talk about it.
I'm Julia Gaskill, equally excited to talk about the Dark Crystal.
And I'm Evan, and I'm ready to be a paladin.
I'm so glad you brought your spoon. That's
Yes.
very exciting that you brought props.
It's all you need.
We also, before we get started, we did have a very serious conversation before starting this whole thing about what T-shirts we were all going to wear to talk about the Dark Crystal. And unfortunately, none of us own Dark Crystal T-shirts, which is awful. Is it awful? I don't know.
Only until recently.
Yeah, that's when it started being awful, because guys, the Dark Crystal is interesting again.
Again?
For the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, I feel like a lot of Muppet fans out there, Henson fans out there, really either love the Dark Crystal or they agree that it is a beautiful movie that is basically dull and not really worth revisiting on a regular basis, like, say, the Muppet films or Labyrinth. I believe that we are all among the camp of Dark Crystal is great but boring. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I remember when the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was announced, and we all kind of went like, oh man, I'm going to have to watch 10 whole hours of Dark Crystal content. And I mean, we all kind of loved it, right?
Yeah.
It was great. But let's be honest, when Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was announced, our first thought was, oh, another project the Henson Company will not get around to making.
That's true.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is the Henson Company, they've been talking for years about a Dark Crystal sequel movie, a Labyrinth sequel movie, Fraggle Rock starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Doc's grandson, even though we all know that Doc is a lifelong bachelor. So
There's already a plot hole.
yeah, so like this just seemed like another thing that wasn't going to happen. And I kind of feel like the age of Netflix throwing money at any project that comes along might be coming to an end, the way they're starting to cancel things. But
That may be true, but thank God that the Henson Company got in there before they realized how much money they're throwing at these limited series.
I can't believe like how much money this probably cost, and that's not really
so
in our purview. But
yeah, I would love to know what the budget of this show was. Like every shot, it's like, so wait a minute, they had to build the puppets and the costumes and the sets and the props. They had to figure out how to make the puppets work, and we all know like puppets are expensive. And like making puppets look alive is expensive.
Yeah, I mean, and these aren't just puppets. Like not to talk down on like the Muppets, but like maybe building like a Kermit the Frog is definitely cheaper than building, Skektek the scientist.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, I mean, all the animatronics and the puppetry in general, but also it doesn't take place in our world. It takes place in a fictional realm, and they have to build all of those sets, and that's, I don't know, it's all just mind-blowing.
And there's like 7 Gelfling tribes in like 7 different disparate ecosystems.
Yeah, and all like the background Gelflings as well. Like, yeah.
I did wonder, like, did they build like 4 podlings and just use them over and over and over again and we just didn't notice?
You think the podlings were like the guest characters on the TV show Dinosaurs?
Yes.
where they had like 5 different puppets that they used in every episode?
Yeah, they just like reuse the wigs, easy.
Yeah, that might be right.
Yeah, and especially because this is the kind of show where we would hope that they would use CGI as little as possible. And any other show or any other property, even if this was like an original Henson Company property, they would have used CG so much more, even just for the backgrounds.
Well, I was gonna say, like, this came out a couple of months after the Lion King remake, Jon Favreau's Lion King remake. And what those 2 projects have in common is that also has absolutely nothing real on screen, right? Mm-hmm. Every single, like, it's just an animated movie that's supposed to look photorealistic. Mm-hmm. But this also has absolutely nothing real on screen at any point. But it's all live action.
By nothing real, because
well, I mean, there's nothing natural. There's no people. There's no real animals. There's no natural environments.
You're right, but at the same time, I would argue that puppets are way more real than in an animation.
Joe,
It depends on how you're defining it.
No, what I'm saying is that like they're both equally fabricated, but that one is entirely made in a computer, and this one was entirely built by people and shot in real life. Like that's what's startling to me.
And I'm
that
assuming
it's like so much more complicated.
And I'm assuming you've all heard about Henson's law, which someone on Twitter came up with, and I should find out exactly so I can cite this person. But the idea that even the very best CGI is going to look dated in a few years, but puppetry and practical effects will always look good.
Yeah,
like, that's what the Dark Crystal did originally. That's what the TV show is doing now.
It always makes me think of Jurassic Park, like comparing the first film to the newer ones. The first one looks so much better than the two ones that have come out recently because they really relied heavily on like physical production as opposed to like using really minimal CGI. And I feel like that it's true. It holds up over time much better.
Well, and I mean, Jurassic Park uses CGI in the same way that this series did too, I think.
Yeah, to better enhance it.
Right, like, and the shots that they do have in that movie are like the creators of the technology, like pouring their heart and soul into every shot. You know, and that's the puppetry here is the Henson Company getting to flex its muscles for the first time in decades. I mean,
I mean, they did a little bit of that in Happy Time Murders of like, oh look, that puppet really looks like it's walking, which is one of the few things I really appreciate about that movie. But you're right, like it's rare these days to see the Henson Company really say like, hey, look what we can do.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys a couple of questions here. So, is there anything from the original movie that you think was done better than the series did? I worded that very, very oddly. There's a lot that we love about the TV show that improved on the film, but is there anything that they couldn't improve on?
Oh, wait, those are different questions. Do you mean things from the movie, things that were better in the movie, or things that were better in the TV show?
Better in the movie is what I'm asking. Because I think we're all in agreement right now from this conversation of the things that we agree that like did not work for us in the film, but they really tweaked and fixed these issues for the series. So I'm curious about the other way around.
So one thing that I'm thinking of right off the bat is the Podlings do a better song and dance number in the original than they do in this. None of the songs really stood out besides like the title theme, whereas I kind of remember the Podling song from the original, and it's just a great number. It's real entertaining, maybe because it's so much better than a lot of the rest of the scenes around it, but you know.
Can you sing a few bars of the Podling song for us?
No, because I don't speak Podling.
That's why.
I don't want to be offensive to our Podling listeners.
Yeah, good point. Anthony or Julia, any thoughts?
One thing that I was really pleasantly surprised. One of the best things, one of my favorite things in the movie, is when the Skeksis Emperor dies and they do the trial by stone. And so I went into this show assuming that there was going to be a trial by stone because it's like one of the iconic set pieces. And then they don't do it because it's already a good thing in the movie. So we didn't need to see it again.
That's true. Although I've been on the record of saying how much I dislike the trial by stone because I think it makes no sense.
Oh, it makes no sense.
Dude, nothing in that movie makes sense.
But here's one thing that I really appreciate about the film is that we were introduced to the I can't remember the characters' names. The Michael Keegan Key
the ritual master.
Thank you. The ritual master, whose job it was to be like, okay, so we need like something that we can do to give this, these actions meaning or these, whatever it is. And it seems to me like that's the kind of thing that he would have been like, oh, we need to figure out how to resolve some sort of conflict. I'll figure something out. Don't worry, you guys. And like, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. Like he's a crazy Skeksis. So that part to me now, the trial by stone makes a little bit of sense because of his character.
They also two of the Gelflings, and I'm racking my mind, not trying to remember the characters' names, but just trying to remember which two. They do a trial by air in this film.
Oh yeah, in
this show. It's
Celadon and Madrafera.
Yeah, thank you. I knew one was Celadon. I just couldn't remember who she was competing against. But to me, that suggests that maybe there's a trial for each element, and we'll see more trials in the future. If the show
trial by water, trial by fire.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Trial by
interesting.
heart,
Yeah.
you guys.
And that's how we get a trial by Captain Planet.
Yeah.
Do them all at the same time.
Yeah.
The real Captain Planet is Aughra. I mean, pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's right.
That is true.
But
Oh, sorry, Anthony, go ahead.
no, just like speaking of elements that were good in the film, Aughra is one of the best things about that movie. And in here, she's just as good. She gets way more to do. We learn way more about her, and none of it disappointed me at all. Like,
Well,
that's what's startling to me.
We learn so much about her, but at the same time, there's like so much Aughra stuff like thrown into this story of like what she can do with her eye, and like with the scene where she like dies and then comes back from inside the Skeksis, and like she's got all these, I don't want to say powers, but I mean they're like these abilities and like the knowledge and the backstory. And
what's great is that she can send her eye out on missions to spy on people, just like Mrs. Potato Head does it in Toy Story 3.
Yeah, she is very much Mrs. Potato Head.
You know, along the lines of what Anthony was saying about how like they threw in all this new stuff about Aughra, something that interested me that frankly I will admit is a gap is a lot of the like extended lore type stuff, not lore the character, lore the noun. A lot of the extended lore stuff does actually tie in to the old art books and lore books from the past. So like the idea that Aughra was given the, you know, observatory by the Urskeks and things like that are actually in notes from the past. And I have to thank my friend April for pointing this out to me, because she is the only person I know who really loves the Dark Crystal. So I was chatting with her a little bit this week.
Nice. Yeah, it definitely seems like you know, they've been pulling from, you know, the original book, the newer books, like they've been building on the mythology and not kind of rewriting it. Like I would think like Star Wars is probably doing, you know, where they're telling more story, but like they kind of can't just tell the same story that they did from the comic books. They've got to do something new that's going to surprise audiences. So we kind of have to forget half of the additional stuff that's been written over the years.
Yeah, it's actually bringing up surprise, not to hog this, but like, what do you guys think about the nature of prequels? Because on the one hand, it kind of bothers me that this ends and it's like the Gelfling are so happy, but we know they're going to get genocided in a couple trying. But on the other hand, like, you know, and I know it's been said, but like other movies happen where you know how it ends. Like there are movies about history and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like when you watch Patton, you know what's going to happen. But I don't know. The ending didn't sit right to me. Not to jump to the ending, but just, you know, because you mentioned something adjacent to it.
Well, it's one of those things where, I mean, even though I think it's in episode 8, we see Deet has like a vision of Jen restoring the crystal or whatever. But the ending of this kind of made me hope that they just decide this is an alternate universe and like have these characters defeat the Skeksis, and we don't have to worry about Jen ever. Evan's enemy, Jen, by the way. We don't have to worry about him. He never happens. Just forget that movie was ever made. Tell a story where Deet defeats the Skeksis, right? Like,
I would be all right with that, especially because you know, I mentioned this in my review of the first 2 episodes, but I hate the idea of like, hey, remember that thing? Well, we're going to show you how we got that thing. It's you know, a year without a Santa Claus. Oh no, I'm sorry. The
Santa Claus is coming to town.
Thank you. Santa Claus is coming to town. There's so many Santa Claus movies. Santa Claus is coming to town syndrome of like, that's how he got his red suit. That's why he has a beard. Like, that's what all the movie Solo is. Like, that's like, we don't need to know how Wolverine got his jacket.
Yeah.
So, you know, the fact that like I think there's very little of that in the series.
The scientist, I feel like, has a fair amount of that, right? We see how he get his eye. We see him create the Gartham. Like that's the cliffhanger ending. Is that he's
essence,
like
the essence machine itself too? How they discovered that they can use the crystal as a weapon.
Yeah, a lot of his material, and Mark Hamill's great. You know, he can sell all that exposition, but
hot takes.
Well, right. But by the way, Muppet Show guest star Mark Hamill, huh?
Yeah.
He's back, baby. And Steve Whitmire played the voice of the scientist in the movie. So if you go watch the Mark Hamill episode of The Muppet Show, it has both scientist Skeksis in it.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
But yeah, he's the one where they do a lot of that stuff. I think it all works okay, but it happens with him quite a bit.
It's weird because I was kind of interested in it in this context. Like, I was like, oh, that's like the crystal wasn't a weapon, and but then they made it that way. That was more interesting to me, and I love Santa Claus is Coming to Town, so forget that. But that was more interesting to me than like how Wolverine stole a leather jacket from a farmer. Like, that mattered more to me.
I think that's because you've never cared about this universe. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say I feel like the difference is like with like Wolverine or any X-Men property in Star Wars is those universes are so fleshed out, and so we already have so much to focus on. Whereas with the Dark Crystal, we aren't given like any backstory, and like I don't know, we weren't left with. We had so many questions to begin with, so it's nice to actually kind of get some information for a change.
That's a good point, especially because like you say, the Dark Crystal film can be pretty confusing, and to kind of flesh these things out and to go, oh, that's why, like that makes more sense. And now maybe I appreciate the movie a little bit more.
I'm curious. I kind of want to go like watch it right now and see if I like. Yeah, like see if I like it more because I care about this world, or less because I know there's a better version out there. Like,
yeah,
I feel like it could go either way.
Did each of you guys rewatch the movie in preparation for the TV show?
No.
I rewatched it to write my article on how much I hate Jen,
Nice.
but I guess I didn't take good enough notes because there's some misinformation in my Jen article. But I digress because...
like 3 people care. It's fine.
Yeah, oh no, I know. Literally, even the people I know who love the Dark Crystal were like, no, you're totally right. But yeah, I rewatched it. And it's... there's parts of it that are still lovely, but again, a lot of what is lovely about it is lovely in this new one. Like I still love the Skeksis. Like, they are the strongest part of the original, and I believe they're also the strongest part of this remake. In particular, I think Chamberlain has the most interesting plot, personally, of just about any character on the show. And also, quick aside, how great was Simon Pegg's Chamberlain voice?
Oh,
so
flawless.
good.
He sounds just like him.
Yeah. Oh, it's like I really would have thought. I thought it was the same person, and then I looked it up, and I'm like, no, Simon Pegg didn't do it in 1980.
There wasn't a hint of like. I consider myself to be really good at like, not so much with like voice actors or whatever, but for celebrities, it's like to hear a voice and be like, yeah, that's so and so, and I didn't get a hint of Simon Pegg through the entire. If I didn't know beforehand, I never would have figured that out.
That was the weirdest thing, right? Because usually when it's like stunt casting to be like Andy Samberg is here and Awkwafina and Keegan-Michael Key.
Although,
you couldn't really tell for almost all of them who the stunt casting was.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say I could definitely recognize Andy Samberg, like, and Mark Hamill.
Yeah, Mark Hamill, yes.
And Harvey Fierstein. Like, those were the ones where I was like...
Yeah, that's a little obvious, Harvey Fierstein. Because Harvey Fierstein has one voice that he does for everything.
He did it.
And it's a Skeksis voice.
Right. That's
it was the right voice for the Gormand. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Who I did not recognize at all was Bill Hader.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Bill Hader's like the master of like disguising his voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's a chameleon. He's a vocal chameleon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of these characters, I'm curious who your favorite characters are from the TV show, both the new characters that were introduced for the film, for the TV show, and the characters that were brought back from the film to the new show.
I like Deet.
Yeah, me too. She's the best.
Yeah.
She's the greatest.
She's I don't know, like the way that they do a really good job with like introducing all of the characters. They're all really like fleshed out and well-rounded, but like Deet, I don't know, she's so sweet and innocent, but at the same time she's really true to herself and really positive and really adorable, and I like her so much. And like, I don't know, the twist at the end is really interesting that I didn't see coming with her in the Darkening, and I'm excited if there is maybe a second season, because it's definitely maybe open to it, seeing what they do with her in the future. But she's like great in this entire series, and I like her and Hupp a lot as
Yeah,
well.
that's the thing. Like, I feel like Deet and Hupp's relationship is like really the heart of this thing.
It's funny because Deet and Hupp is probably my favorite of the new characters.
Hupp's wonderful.
I think it's clear that like I said, Chamberlain is my favorite of the old ones. But Deet and Hupp, are both very, very strong, and I think both really show it's a nice thing where they're positive characters, but their naivete is not like portrayed as being a weakness.
Yeah, I agree.
They're very Fraggle Rock kind of characters.
Yeah.
Build off of what Anthony was saying in I know his article that he wrote a couple weeks ago. But I think Deet continues the long Dark Crystal tradition of being 1,000 times more interesting and likable than the male lead Gelfling.
Yes.
Because Rian bothered me a lot, and I don't care at all. I could not care less about Rian and Deet as an item. Like, there were moments where they, like, tease it, and I'm like, I can't think of anything I want to watch less than a Rian and Deet romance story.
I absolutely agree, especially because it's like in the timeline of the events of the show. Yes. Didn't his girlfriend just die like 2 days ago?
Yes. I couldn't tell how much time had passed, like between him and Deet, like really connecting. But it did feel like it's maybe been a few weeks at most, but it's hard to tell.
Even still, like takes a while. Like apparently they were like seemed like they were really hot and heavy. So how long do you wait? What's the normal Gelfling waiting time after your significant other passes away? Their essence is drained.
Like, I'll say that I think Deet and Rian are pretty adorable together. I'll say that. Like, if that happens, I'm on board for it. But I think that is more evidence that, like, Mira should not have been Rian's fridged girlfriend. Like,
yeah.
That could have
been fixed easily.
She should have just been a fellow soldier. Like yes, somebody has to be the Gelfling that gets drained first. I understand that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to have a connection to one of our main characters. But like they could just be like partners as crystal guards, right? Like I feel like it would still devastate him, but it wouldn't be the women in fridges trope.
Right. I also would have appreciated, I mean, building off of that idea that even if they had to be significant others, if they had swapped the genders, it would have fixed a lot of the problems. And actually, I think Rian would have been a much more interesting character as a female soldier, especially because we've seen so many female soldiers in the series. And I'm kind of curious, like, what is it that makes a female Gelfling like want to pick up a sword and help defend the Lords of the Crystal or whatever it is?
Well, it's so interesting because it's very clearly like a matriarchal society, right?
Yeah.
Like, not just because they have wings. Like, now we know that, like, the female Gelflings run the government and, like, and are in the army. We see that. So it's interesting, and I'm curious more about it in a broad sense. There's something about Rian that just feels very generic. And obviously, Dark Crystal has always wrestled with being kind of generic. Not in its visuals, which are very unique, but, like, in the narrative of, like, the chosen one must, journey from nowhere. Like, it's the hero's journey in its simplest form.
Well, and that he was the one that they inherited, right? You know that? You guys hear about this?
No.
I was reading an interview with, I guess, what's their names? Jeffrey Aldis and Will Matthews, the two showrunners.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about how in the Power of the Dark Crystal script that I guess Jendy Tartakovsky was going to make, Rian was like the lead in that.
Oh, interesting.
That's him. And the other characters they created from whole cloth.
Interesting.
So I think that's why he doesn't feel as well developed or as organic. Is that like they were like, well, we got this guy, we'll use him. Let's come up with our own ideas.
I'll tell you one thing that I really liked about Rian. And I should look up to see who the performer of Rian was. But Rian always did this thing, especially when he was like nervous or holding a sword. But like he like was shifting his weight from foot to foot, and like it really gave him like a lot of like physicality and like an actual weight to the character that very quickly made me forget that he was a puppet.
You know who had the best physicality, in my opinion? The Hunter.
Oh my God! Yeah, Hunter was terrifying.
But it was such a great the way that he moved. was almost, and this is like a weird thing to say, but it was almost reminiscent of Sweetums, but like in a way that wasn't adorable. He has a similar walking pattern. And I know it's obviously not the same person because, it's not Richard Hunt, but, I don't know. I just loved the Hunter, and what a great design on that character too.
Totally.
So do you guys have any favorite moments from the season that you want to share?
I reviewed episode 7, and that might be my favorite episode of the series. They just had a short stint, but like the heretic and the Wanderer, like them putting on their weird opera puppet show play was like just delightful. And that episode as a whole is really great because it's like is also juxtaposed by like the ending where the entire Stone in the Wood clan is like mind swiped by the Arathim. But I don't know, just like I found it was such a good move because they know that we knew how like the Dark Crystal came into be and how the Skeksis and the Mystics came to be, but they also knew that they had to tell us in the TV show, and we're like, okay, well, how can we make that interesting for the viewers who already have all of this information? Let's just do it in the zaniest way possible with these two characters. And so I just found that whole like element of the episode like delightful, and it was just fun, and it's nice.
I couldn't agree more. I remember I had watched the episode right before you did, Julia, and you and I were talking about, you were saying like, oh, I'm going to watch the next 2 episodes, whatever. And I was like, I'm so excited for you to get to episode 7.
Remember,
I'm not going to tell you why. I thought it was the best. It was so much fun, and it was funny, especially for like a movie that has very little levity, and to have these bits of humor that are scattered throughout the season really made a huge difference. And that made that whole sequence at the with the Heretic and the Wanderer to be so much fun. Also, I really appreciated the fact that like you say, we already know the story. Like they were split. They're going to get back together at some point with the next conjunction. But to get a new story about what's happening with a Skeksis and a Mystic, and to see like 2 of them broke off and they are like living together, waiting until they can be one person.
I know.
Is the Urskek again?
And there's such like an odd couple, like wacky roommate situation too, because they're so different.
Well, all that stuff where the Wanderer is talking slowly and the Heretic keeps saying what he's going to say to speed him up, I think is so funny.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's the sloth in Zootopia.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's been done many times.
It also reminds me of Treebeard.
Yeah.
Which I always wanted to say what Treebeard is good. Like, I love the 2 Towers, but it could be a half hour shorter if Treebeard just talked like a person, Right,
but that's the joke. That's why Treebeard is Treebeard.
I know, but no, another favorite moment of mine is in, I guess it's episode 5, when Hupp gets very frustrated and like throws his spoon down and says that he's not a paladin, and Deed has to like tell him all the things that he's done for her and like talk him back into feeling like a hero. It is, I'm not gonna lie, I teared up a little bit.
It's a great moment.
I just love those 2.
Everything with Hupp was just gold.
Yeah, and we should mention that Hupp is one of the few characters who is actually voiced by his puppeteer, which is Victor Yer.
Yeah,
that's true. Yes, Victor Yer gets a lot of props. And I have to wonder too if Victor Yer did much improvising, because there was a couple of lines there where it's like, I would be surprised if this was in the script. Like, Hupp want die.
Right.
Such a good line, though.
It's a great line.
It's really good.
I've seen people sharing that on Twitter.
I'm only halfway.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm only halfway through the making of the documentary that they did, and like apparently the performer memorized a lot of the like the vocabulary that was created for podlegs, and so he can speak it somewhat fluently. So possibly he did improvise.
That's great.
That's cool. I recently watched, this is such a non sequitur, but I recently watched The Fifth Element, and I guess Lilu's language is kind of a real language, and so the actress and the director would often have conversations in their made up language that no one else could understand.
Huh.
I guess that's a thing that people can do.
Yeah.
Making up languages, linguists.
That's
anyway, now I also want to rewatch Sid the Science Kid, because Obviously, Victor Yared's big speaking role as the purple kid, Gerald.
Shit.
I'm ready. You can hear it once you know it if
Yeah.
you rewatch the Science Kid clip.
I always think of Victor Yared as he was one of the, I don't know if I should call him scabs, but they did the Statler and Waldorf From the Balcony, where Steve Whitmire and Dave Goelz like quitted after 9 episodes or whatever. Victor Yared was either Statler or Waldorf for the remainder of those episodes.
He was, yeah.
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 And so like up until now, that's what, when I see that name, it's like, oh, that's one of the fake Statler and Waldorfs. But he's so good in this. So now he's just Hupp.
Now he's Hupp, and we'll always think of him as Hupp. It'll be on his gravestone now.
And I think he's in Muppets from Space, isn't he? Isn't he like one of the Gonzo fans on the beach?
Yeah, he's like I think he's on the bus with. Is he on the bus with Peter Linz, or is he on the beach?
No,
Steve
Whitmire's on the beach. Steve
Whitmire's on the bus. Yeah.
I thought there was more people on the bus with.
Because he's got
the beach is like. The beach is like Peter Linz, Drew Massey, I think Victor Yared, John Kennedy.
Sure, yeah. All right. I'm learning something here.
Little Muppets from Space talk.
There's a movie that I don't think about. That's a movie I think about just as often as Dark Crystal.
Let's get ready for season 6 of Moving Right Along. This looks familiar. The Muppets from Space season.
It's gonna be called RU3.
Oh, okay. But it's the 6th season.
Yes, correct.
Speaking of Victor Yared, like how great is it to see some of those familiar names in the credits?
Yeah.
Well, and towards the end, Madra Argot, who is the Grottons, the underground clan, their leader, that's Louise Gold doing the voice and performing, and she's so good in this. Like,
she's
good in everything, yeah.
I mean, she's good in everything, but like, I don't get to hear Louise Gold do characters much these days, you know?
Yeah.
She was in Muppets Most Wanted and yet doesn't have a line. I think Annie Sue makes a "oh" noise at one point.
Which, by the way, I am not happy about that. They got her to play her character, and there's no actual proof on screen.
Yeah.
When, like, just have her say a line.
Yeah.
One line.
Annie Sue should sing the Macarena. Am I right?
They could have brought it back. They could have brought the Macarena back.
So we're
Piggy sings it. Piggy sings it in the movie, dude.
No, I know, but it would have been a hit if Amy Sue.
Oh, right. There you go. Yeah.
It would have hit the charts once again, and then people would be dancing the Macarena to the dulcet tones of Louise Gold.
Speaking of, I hadn't realized that Dave Goelz was the puppeteer for Fizzgig, but not the voice in the original.
Yeah, not Fizzgig. He's the one with the eye patch.
No, in the movie he was Fizzgig.
In the movie,
he was
the puppeteering for Fizzgig.
Oh.
So him being Baffy the Fizzgig, Baffy is the name of the one with the eye patch, is like a reference to that fact. But again, I didn't know that. I obviously looked it up. I was like, oh, who did Fizzgig in the... Like, I was just clicking through. Dave Goelz was the puppeteer for Fizzgig. He didn't make the noise.
That was what I was going to ask.
Why on earth not, I wonder?
He does make the noise. He does make the noises in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to assume, Anthony, to your question of why he wouldn't have to begin with, is like, with very few exceptions, there aren't many familiar Muppet performer voices in the original film. I know Jerry Nelson is the dying Emperor Skeksis, but that was also recorded much later because it wasn't part of the original. And we've got Brian Meal as the dying mystic. Like, are there any other?
Steve Whitmire is the Whitmire is the scientist. Yeah.
But like, for people like us, like when we spot these voices very easily, especially with the Muppet performers, that kind of takes us out of it, which is especially important for like a high fantasy like Dark Crystal.
But what I'm saying is that, like, in this Baffy the Fizzgig, did that sound like Gonzo to you?
No, not at all.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
why did they did something electronic to his voice to give him that? Because I've never heard Dave Goelz make that sound before.
Yeah. Yes.
But if Fizzgig sounded like Gonzo screaming, that would have been probably unnecessarily silly.
I would have liked the movie a little more.
Yeah, me too. Like, that's the thing. If Jen sounded like Ernie, I would like that movie more. No question. Like,
right. Or if, as you have said to me before, if Jen and Kira were we had the same voices of maybe Gobo and Red.
Yeah.
Maybe that would make a difference.
Yeah. Or maybe Moki, right? Because it's Kathy Mullen was the performer. Like, she could have done it.
Totally.
Anyway.
Yep. I also liked seeing how much puppetry was done by Warwick Brownlow Pike.
Yeah.
Who so as some of you probably know who are watching this, who've made it a half hour into this video, that Warwick is also the performer of Gonger on Sesame Street. And
MVP Gonger.
What did you say, Evan? I'm sorry.
MVP Gonger.
MVP Gonger, who is very quickly becoming one of my favorite Sesame Street characters. I love Gonger. I think he's hysterical in everything he does. And just to see like, oh yeah, the same guy. Yeah, he did the Skeksis, like, or the Chamberlain Skeksis. Yeah. Like that's amazing to me.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's incredibly talented. And then of course Kevin Clash, who has been working with the Henson Company for a few years. He was also heavily involved with the Happy Time Murders. But just to see like he's Agra, he was the Hunter Skeksis for a lot of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and with Agra specifically, like that's Frank Oz in the movie.
Yeah.
And so it's like for the two performers of Agra to be like two all-time great and like two of the like Hall of Fame Muppet perform. I mean, like they're not messing around. They're like, who could match Frank Oz? Oh, Kevin Clash absolutely can.
He did do the puppetry for Frank Oz in Muppets from Space.
Ah, there's a connection.
That's right, yeah. And Muppet Treasure Island too, I think.
You're probably right, but the only one I know for a fact is Muppets from Space.
but also again, Agra has been both Grover and Elmo, that's fun too.
So do you guys have any thoughts about what the second season might hold?
It's interesting because it can't just be the Gartham slaughter the Gelflings this season.
I hope not. I want to watch that for 10 hours.
10 whole hours.
Julia, I could see your cogs turning.
I honestly don't know because I don't know if we do get one more season, if that's all we're gonna get, or if we're gonna get more, because we know how the series has to end unless there's like some twist that we aren't aware of. But I figure we're gonna see the Gelfling like rally and then them create more of the Gartham. Obviously Deet has a whole new journey that she's got to go on. Her and Hupp have to reunite. Hupp has no idea what's happened to Deet. I had that thought earlier and I was like, oh my god, Hupp's gonna be so upset when he finds out that Deet's going through this tragic thing that he can't save her from. Anyway, that's Deet. A whole other tangent. So I guess besides furthering the story that we're already so seeped in, just following those like threads that they've kind of left.
I do like the idea that Anthony brought up earlier of that this may be an alternate
it's a nice thought.
Well, but let's think of it this way. What if with Deet's visions of the future and maybe seeing what's going to happen in the course of the film, what if the film is just one of those visions and then they just have to avoid it? They have to do something to make sure that doesn't happen.
I love the idea of a timeline where Jen doesn't exist.
Right.
Or isn't the hero.
You're on some real Doctor Strange stuff right now.
Yeah, or some It's a Wonderful Life type of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I still want to, there's still obviously more in the Gelfling rallying. There's a couple tribes that we really haven't seen much of.
That's true.
We certainly, I want to see more of the Arathim, who I forgot to mention. My favorite thing in the show was probably when all of the big Arathim form faces to talk, which it's very Labyrinth.
Right.
I think we were all thinking that with the talking hands.
Yeah. But anyway, so obviously there's more to be done with them because the live Arathim are still on the Gelfling side, even if the dead ones are Gartham. I don't know. I think the big thing that they can do in a sequel season, if they did, is bring in the Mystics a little more. Mm-hmm. Maybe looking for the Mystics, and the Gelflings have to find the Mystics, and the Mystics will take a stand in some way. Obviously, as a peaceful race, they aren't going to fight, but you know what I mean. And I'm curious to know why also the right answer, and this is a weird thing to say, but in the context of the show, isn't just for all the Mystics to kind of kill or incapacitate themselves selflessly.
Well, that's a pretty that's a pretty big ask of them, you know.
Well, also because like their goal is not necessarily to stop the Skeksis. Their goal is to merge with the Skeksis.
I guess you're right. I just meant after the Archer did what he did, obviously.
But that's also because like the Hunter is maybe the most dangerous, arguably the most dangerous Skeksis.
But I think there's a direction they can go. I think though one thing the season did that was smart was ending it in a way where if we don't get more episodes, it won't be the end of the world. Like, I'd like more episodes, don't get me wrong, but like, I think that they're going to have to play that ending pretty carefully.
I think you're right. Well,
and I think that's my main thought about like the future of the show is after these 10 episodes, I trust this creative team to tell another good story if they have one, and to not make more if they don't. And we know that this took like 3 years to make. So it's not like if they come out with another season, it's going to come out in March.
It would be faster the second time because
they have the puppets and stuff. That's true, but
you're right. It wouldn't be like a normal season. It would have to be probably a couple years from now.
Right.
But what I would kind of hope is like hypothetically, if this show is as big of a hit as we think it is, you know, in Netflix and Jim Henson Company's eyes, then, you know, I would like to see one more season of this prequel leading up to the film, and then if they want to do more, to jump ahead post-film and start telling new stories in this world that don't have an end date. That would be fun for me. I would like to see what happens after the course of the film.
I got some thoroughly mediocre comics you can read.
Yeah, okay. I also, and I had this theory, and I put a timeline on it, and I think maybe my timeline is pretty far off, but my theory was that about a year from now, rather than with the assumption that the season we just watched actually had an ending that led to the film, which we know it did not. But my original theory was a year from now they were going to announce that the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was such a huge hit, they're going to do a season of a Labyrinth TV show, because that has been the Henson Company's pattern of like do something in the Dark Crystal universe, and then a year later celebrate Labyrinth in the same way.
Yeah.
So I've already started casting Jareths in my head.
Who you casted?
Who have I casted? So I was thinking if you want to go the route of like who's a David Bowie type in the sense that it's a like avant-garde musician, Lady Gaga, who would not be my number one choice, but I could see them casting in that way. Or if you want to go for someone who's actually a David Bowie type, either Tilda Swinton or Kate Blanchett.
My number one pick is actually Annie Clark of St. Vincent, who is like she performs in a similar way to Bowie, but yeah, this is not the, I don't know if anyone, not to shut everybody else up, but I don't think they're gonna do a Labyrinth thing.
I don't know, man. I wouldn't think they would do Dark Crystal either. And look at it now.
I mean, it's Janelle Monáe, right?
Good choice.
These are all very good choices.
Oh, that would be so good. All right, we might have to do another chat sometime where we kind of fan cast a Labyrinth Netflix TV series. Do you guys have any final thoughts about Dark Crystal Age of Resistance?
I've got two that we didn't touch on. Well, one like kind of final thought, then one thing we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about what our most upsetting thing from this series is.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Very much is when, I don't remember which Skeksis it was, but one of them peed.
It's Gorman.
It's so gross.
It's the triple stream.
I mean, and there were a couple other moments that like, you know, Aquafina Skeksis, like early on, I was like, that's cool. They're showing us like the gross out things that you can do with puppets. But by the end, I was very glad that Skeksis got killed. But the peeing, I was like, I don't want to know how that's happening. I just don't. I don't need that information.
Like, who is the audience for that? Like, what did they think that would bring to the show? I don't know. I didn't care for it.
I know our friend Shane had tweeted about the scene where they're in the bath. The what is the one who with the glasses?
The scholar.
The scroll keeper.
Scroll keeper.
Yeah, that's it.
The scroll keeper is like in the bath, and he has like his feet up, and his stomach like has rolls of fat, and he has his feet up, and like that's another thing that's like, I don't know if we really needed to see a naked Skeksis.
But apparently Aughra did. She put her eye right in the water.
Yeah.
And then she didn't even clean it off before putting it back in her head.
Well, she had to know how they pee 3 streams at once.
Apparently.
So the only people who know how they pee are the Skeksis themselves and Aughra. And let's keep it that way.
Yeah, I don't need to know, but I felt like that needed to be brought up. My final thought on the show is, I don't know, like, I don't want to get too much on a soapbox, but like, being a Henson fan, I kind of just assume most projects, with the exception of Sesame Street, there aren't going to be a lot of female characters, and I didn't do any research into this show before it came out. Like, I was kind of excited, but very mediocrely excited. I knew I was going to watch it, but I didn't feel like I needed to invest time until I was watching it. And I didn't realize how many all of the new characters that they introduced. There's so many female characters, and it's just really gratifying, and it just, I don't know, it made me happy. Representation matters. There's also like Deet's two dads we didn't talk about. That was like, it was mentioned and it was shown, but like it wasn't made into a thing, and that was absolutely wonderful. And so I don't know, like the variety and diversity of their cast, and like certain like characters, usually like females, got to do things you don't normally get to see in a story like this, and it was wonderful, and I'm really happy that the Henson company like did that, and they made like, it's a really matriarchal society like we talked about, and it's good, and I had a lot of emotions, and it made me very happy. All right.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of Deet's family, Deet's little brother is adorable.
He's really adorable.
I love that guy. Bobbin, yeah. Cute. I was gonna say the most upsetting thing for me was probably when the peeper beetles chew out the scientist's eye at the end of episode 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was so gross.
Yeah, there's some like scary moments on the show.
Yeah. Well,
I
I was watching it one day, and my 4-year-old was like, "I want to watch this with you," and I'm just like, I think we're gonna wait a few years on this one, kid.
Yeah.
You know, but it was like Hup running around when she happened to come in the room. So.
That's all right. Kids love Hup.
Yeah. But my final thought, I don't know if any of the rest of you, well, I think you reviewed it, if I remember right, Julia. Were any of the rest of you guys fans of Jim Henson's Creature Shop Challenge?
I did not watch it.
Yeah.
I watched a little bit of it.
Sure.
I watched all of it.
Yeah, me too. I liked it a lot.
Me too.
But I remember when that show was on, thinking, like, yeah, this is great. This is fun. This is a fun concept. But what is this person ever going to get to work on? Like, when you win this and you get to work for the Jim Henson Company in 2015 or whatever year it was, 2014, like, what are you going to do? This is no dream job. But Robert Bennett, who won that show, is credited on this as a sculptor and a costume designer. Oh. So he actually did get to work on like the big expensive Netflix show that Henson did a few years later. So that's awesome. Yeah, that made me very happy that like the Henson Company is active enough again that contest was worthwhile for the winner after all.
I will add, I visited the Henson Company workshop in LA a few years ago, and I did meet him because he was working in the workshop. And like, cool. It was nice that like it wasn't like they had a huge project that they were working on or anything like that, and they needed all hands on deck. It was just like, that's his job now, and he's there. So right. I think thankfully they lived up to their word and they gave him a job. But more importantly, probably for him, is that it wasn't just that you get to work at the Henson Company and like we're going to put you at a cubicle in the corner and you could do whatever. It's like you get to work on the Dark Crystal. Like, that's a big deal. If you've always wanted to work in the Henson workshop and you're working on like this huge franchise that Jim personally oversaw,
right?
Like that, it's nice that he got that opportunity. Evan, any last thoughts from you?
I'm glad that there are Gelflings that I care about more than Jen.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, surely you cared about Kira more than Jen.
Okay.
Already.
Yes. No. I did. But unfortunately, thinking Kira is okay and thinking Jen is like the worst character in any Henson adjacent property means that it averages out to a pretty low score still. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I think we can all agree that Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was fun. And I personally hope that they do another season. I'd love to see more. And there's already so much to unpack. We've been talking for, going on an hour now. And like we're really just skimming the surface of the things that we loved and really want to expand on. So this is fantastic.
Like you frogs expand.
Yeah, like that. All right. Well, Anthony, Julia, Evan, thank you all so much for joining me on this video chat. Everyone watching, we would love to hear your thoughts as well. So leave us comments on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all those lovely places. And thank you for reading ToughPigs.com, and keep reading for more Dark Crystal content coming at you soon. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.